Look at me, sure. I'm the captain.
Captain James Howe!
Ahoy there. Welcome to Rated Aargh. Thank you for joining us on another adventure as we chart our course through the realms of cinematic piracy. Today, we take a look at the Shaw Brothers' 1973 martial arts film, The Pirate. My name is Ryan, and please join me in welcoming my co-captains, Christian and Braxton. Guys, how's it going?
Hello.
I'm just glad we finally got to a movie where they just went simple with the title.
I mean, no kidding.
Back to basics.
I do have something that I'll talk about in a second about the title specifically. But yeah, The Pirate, just nice and simple. Which, I mean, you know, that's the American term. But it is what it is. So, have any of you seen this movie before? Just right off the top? I know Braxton recommended it. And then last night he said something and I was like, wait, have you seen this before? And he's like, no.
I suggested it because we were looking up, older movies that were about pirates. And we've done one or two that are, sort of classic era 30s, 40s. And we'll do a few more. But I wanted a not modern one that was sort of a different style. And when I saw that there was basically a Kung Fu Shaw Brothers version of it, I was like, oh, that could be kind of an interesting change of pace. So it is definitely not the best one of a Shaw Brothers movie I've seen, or like a Kung Fu movie I've seen, but it was very. I got what I was expecting, basically. So I'm glad we got to cover something like this on the pod.
On the pod.
On the pod.
Yeah, it was fun. Christian, you said you hadn't seen it either?
I have never seen it. And I was thoroughly surprised because this was a pretty good change of pace, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've started year two pretty strong. In general,
I will say,
we watched The Abode, we watched Master and Commander, and now we've watched this. And I would say basically none of
each of those.
I would say basically none of the above are anything similar to what we watched in the first year.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It's a very good point. And I will say that I don't think I've ever been more appreciative of zooms.
They were fun, and we talked about them a little bit last night when we were watching this. They were fun, and I like the added element of the zooms. They just got a little too carried away with them, like just a little bit. And I feel like a lot of the time it worked, and then there were other towards the end. There's that one scene. I think
it works most of the time.
Well, but there's that one scene. but there's that one scene toward the end where it like cuts and zooms like 4 or 5 times in a row, where I was like, okay, they've gone overboard. Either that or they specifically knew what they were doing with these zoom cuts. I mean, it was a little much. It was a little much, but it was a lot of fun. And I've never seen this movie before. In fact, I'm not sure that I've ever actually seen a Shaw Brothers movie. If I have, I'm not aware of it. And they were a lot of fun. And it was a very unique and different style than what we typically see in like Hollywood movies that we typically go watch, or that we've watched on the show so far.
And I would say for this one, I think, unless I would say you're already really into martial arts films, you don't have to watch it. I would recommend it if you have even a basic interest in it, but I think you're fine to listen to the pod, and we'll show you the most interesting scenes,
or we'll tell you
the
about
action
them.
scenes,
or we'll tell you about them. Yeah. We'll talk about them in some form or fashion. So The Pirate was released on July 27th, 1973 in Hong Kong under the title Da Hai Dao. It has a runtime of 1 hour 41 minutes and is primarily spoken in Mandarin. The film is loosely based on the life of the 19th century pirate Chung Po Sai, who is portrayed by Tai Lung. And funny enough, when I was looking at this earlier, there was a link on Rotten Tomatoes that took me to like Prime Video and Apple TV to like rent it to watch. And Apple TV actually has this listed with the title of Blood Brothers.
Yeah, I think that's incorrect. There's another movie called Blood Brothers, and
I thought
maybe
maybe-
it got mixed up in the file or something.
Possibly, yeah. I just thought
Like
it was
like from that same year, same studio.
well. Yeah, I think the title just got mixed up though, because like the trailer that they have before it, that's
Yeah.
like, hey, this is what like the short cut through of the movie is. It was the correct movie,
Yeah,
and I don't
Who
know
knows?
that the
They
description
release these things
necessarily
under
was or not. I didn't look
a
that
million
close.
different names also.
Yeah, and I mean it's an originally a Chinese movie, and it's being translated, and so it's probably easy to mess up. But I just thought that was weird that Blood Brothers is the title. So this actually on Rotten Tomatoes does not have a critic score or an audience score. I'm guessing it's maybe not popular enough for that for people to have watched. There were a couple reviews, but there were no like overall scores for it. IMDb has this at a 6 out of 10, and Letterboxd has this at a 3.3 out of 5. I mean, I think those are pretty solid, personally, for what my ratings will be towards the end. I think that's pretty much in line. In fact, I think I gave this a 3.5 on Letterboxd when I put that in. I have 2 logline lootings. First one is from Prime Video. Toward the end of the Qing Dynasty, the South China Sea was swarming with pirates looking to plunder treasure-rich Portuguese merchant ships. A titanic tale of a daring and heroic Robin Hood of the seas. Pretty vague. It's pretty vague.
Very vague, especially that the movie doesn't take place on the sea.
For the most part, no.
The first 20 minutes do, if that. The first 15 minutes, and then we go to land. But
Yeah. And then I have another logline looting, and this one is actually from Rotten Tomatoes, and it's potentially the most egregious one that we've ever seen on the show so far.
like
And
it's
it says,
incorrect or
an honorable pirate tries to help struggling fishermen.
okay, okay, you're right. It is the most egregious in the sense that it's not incorrect, but it's like that.
That's close to what mine was.
But that's one of those things where it's taken and it's knocked down to such a basis
Yeah.
that it makes me not want to watch it.
Well,
like it's so.
I think that the thing that I have with the log lines that I don't quite understand is, aren't they supposed to be like a short blurb about the movie that people would read and then be like,
go,
yes, I
"Oh."
want to watch that, or no, I do not want to watch that? Like, isn't that kind of a deciding
Yes.
factor? And having it like that short and that vague, what on earth would that ever entice
you might
anyone
as
to
well just
say,
not have
I
one.
want to go watch this movie? Especially since you can't really stream it anywhere. Like, you have to rent it.
Yeah.
Like, why would someone want to go and pay when you read an honorable pirate tries to help struggling fishermen?
Yes.
What? Really? Christian, I know you've got a logline written. What's yours?
A landlocked pirate gives unsolicited life advice to lovesick peasants.
That's more correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like it. I like it. So this film is loosely based on the life of 19th century pirate Chung Po Sai. So Christian, how historically accurate is this movie?
Well, other than the kung fu, this is the first film that I think we've watched that has been directly based on a specific guy. I know we've had a lot of influence from
Right.
past historical figures. This is the first one that's actually based on a specific guy that we can point to. And here's what's interesting, because we think of Chinese pirates as being super far back in the distant past. Chung Po Sai was born in 1783, died in 1822. That is almost the exact period overlap with the Lafitte's birth and death.
Yeah.
There's overlap with Napoleon. So you're talking about like fairly recent. And in
Right.
terms
That kind of
of
puts it in
actual-
perspective.
actual piracy, yeah, this is one of the last successful pirates like anywhere. in terms of that type of piracy. A little bit about the guy, if we want to dive just a little bit into his life.
I saw this is sort of like a snapshot of like one day of his life.
Yeah.
Sort of is kind of what I read.
Did you know that Chung Po Sai means Chung Po the Kid? So he is literally like Billy the Kid.
That's interesting. All right, here we are. So a couple interesting things about this dude. He, at the height of his pirate operations, whatever you want to call it, they were known as the Red Flag Fleet. I don't know what the Mandarin equivalent of that is, but I guess
Awesome
the interpretation
name.
is the Red Flag Fleet. At the height, and he consolidated two fleets because he was adopted by a woman who was also engaged in commanding pirate vessels. That was technically his mother, but he also married her to legally combine their pirate fleets.
That's
so at the height of his operations, he commanded 600 ships and potentially as many as 50,000 men.
Oh my!
And you
God.
hear about some of these.
So they had a navy, basically.
Yeah,
like their own navy.
And you hear about these pirate armies in the Caribbean, and sometimes it's like 50 guys.
Yeah.
And they're able to conduct this siege on a port or something like that. And you just hear about this like small kind of group of guys. The biggest one you'll ever hear about, the biggest pirate army believed to have ever been assembled in the Caribbean was Morgan's raid on Panama, which was potentially as many as 2,000 men. But this guy was overseeing possibly as much as 50,000 sailors. And in the South China Sea, there were these massive kind of pirate conglomerates. And I'm not super knowledgeable on how exactly they operated. I just know that they were extremely kind of militarized in the sense that they had a very solid structure, a very solid code. But this guy was like one of the top pirates, and we have no idea about what he stood for, who he was, generally what he was involved in. And I think there's just a disconnect there that people don't necessarily understand the history of what was going on in the South China Sea at the time. But perhaps the most interesting thing about his life, you hear a lot of pirate stories of guys who were naval officers or they were pirate hunters, and then they're brought over to the dark side. They become pirates. This guy essentially signed a deal sparing his life and sparing the lives of all of his men, that they would give up piracy and they would be given officer ranks in the Chinese, in the dynasty's navy. And they did do that, and I believe that happened in 1810. Yeah. He negotiated handing over his entire fleet, all their weapons, all their men, everything, and they started sailing for the National Navy. And then he spent the rest of his life as a pirate hunter, chasing down people doing exactly what he was doing. So he essentially spared his life at the end. But, I mean, that's just like a crazy story that I think there should be more movies about.
I was just going to say, I'd like a modern movie that's about him and the pirate queen lady.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ripe for stuff, you know?
They were going up against
Shogun 2
like,
is about that.
Hey, Shogun. I've gotten Braxton into Shogun, but it touches upon this a little bit. It's a little bit earlier, but it is so cool because it is an area of history where you've got these Asian kind of nations, these very old kind of empires that are constantly shifting boundaries and stuff. And then now you've got involvement from the Dutch, you've got involvement from the Spanish, from the Portuguese, and there's piracy intermingling between all of that. But yeah, this guy lived an interesting life. He's got a few islands and landmarks associated with them. Of course, you can't have a pirate without treasure legends that follow him. There are a ton of those. There's one specific cave in China. I believe it's called Jiang Cave, after his name. That is a pretty popular tourist spot that is kind of connected with him and connected to him hiding stuff. But yeah, it's based on a real guy. Don't know how accurate the kung fu part was. Don't know how accurate the specific like naval warfare part of it was. But super cool guy. First time we've ever had a specific historical figure that we can look back to and essentially compare. I think this is a lot of creative license that they took, so we'll have to be careful with that comparison. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I like the guy. I like learning about his history. He's a guy that I wasn't super familiar with. But yeah,
It's really cool. I do have a question. So pretty much like basically right at the beginning of this movie, they get in that battle with the other ship and capture them and like steal their treasure essentially. What in the world was in those boxes? Like I think we figured out
Tiles
they were
of
called
silver.
Tails, right?
I looked it up because they said it about 5,000 times.
Well, yeah, they were gambling with them at one point.
Yes.
But,
So it's
and then
basically
they had what? Did you figure out what the foreign currency was as well?
no. I think that was just a movie prop coin that they had that
Okay.
was gigantic and cartoonish looking.
I mean, it was huge.
But the shape of those actual things was sort of what the bullion looked like. It's basically they would form it into that shape instead of a brick like we would see in European countries.
How much would that
But
be worth?
It was an ancient Chinese unit of weight, and it was basically a little more than an ounce of silver. So I didn't do the conversion of what that would be worth, but basically it's an ounce of silver.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
there was a post on Reddit where someone posted like a real one, and they look kind of similar to the movie, but people under it, I guess it was in like a martial arts subreddit. People were like, "Bro, this is what like people are saying they had like thousands of." Like I guess in a lot of these like historic movies, they would always say, "I'll pay you so and so."
Mhm.
They would just use that unit of measurement because they knew it was an old currency. And people were like, "Bro, like they had a bunch of these in their pockets. Is that what you're telling me? Like, how do they fit all these in their pockets?"
I mean, you'd need like trash bags full of those
Yeah,
things. to,
that's
like,
why they had
throw
them
over
in-
your shoulder like Santa Claus to carry into the
Speaking of-
casino or something.
Of cartoonishly large, their chests were also cartoonishly large. They looked like they were clearly made out of like plywood. And
They
then
were
when they opened them up, it was meant to be full, but you could tell it was a thing that was about that deep, just in the top of the chest. Like the one with the jewels.
Yeah. Yeah. The one with like the necklaces and stuff. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
just
it worked.
really obvious. Yeah. But I mean, it looked cool.
Yeah.
It looked really
Booty.
cool. Yeah. I don't know if they said booty. So
No.
I don't even know how that would translate.
But he did play with his balls.
Yes, he did. At the end.
Did you notice that, Christian? That the main character had 2 silver like ball bearings.
Metal balls that he was like,
That he would like.
yeah, and it reminded me of the Veggie Tales because I just don't like
What?
pirates with a bunch of like. I don't like pirates with a bunch of like metal dangling around.
It reminded me of C Spot Run. Have you ever seen C Spot Run?
I have
There's
not.
a scene where a mobster gets. It's in a children's film. His balls, I guess, are bitten off by a dog, and for some reason, it makes no sense because it wouldn't make sense as like a prosthetic. He has 2 metal ball bearings on like chains that like clack. I always remembered that, obviously, because I watched it as a kid and I was like, "Why are they being like talking
Yeah, I
about
don't
this
know.
dude's metal balls?"
I don't know.
Mm.
Anyway,
yeah.
here's a clip of the metal balls from C Spot Run. Not really.
No. I thought the opening was cool with them like on the sea with their battle and everything. I thought the like the garments that the crew was wearing were kind of interesting. Like is that something that would have been accurate to like what they would have worn at the time? Like they kind of looked more like sailors than pirates, but they also kind of looked like they belong in some kind of like, I don't know, anime.
A stage show.
Or like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think those were the guys on the Dutch crew or the Portuguese crew or whatever European they were supposed to be.
I don't know. I thought they were on the red
Because when it
flag
cut back to
boat.
his, they were all shirtless. Which, by the way, this movie has the most unnecessarily
true.
shirtless guys of all the movies that we've seen. They all have a like a dedicated uniform, and the uniform is like a yellow sash, brown pants, and no shirt.
No shirt.
That's like the uniform.
Yeah. And that one guy had on a headband.
Made of like
Can you
a
imagine
nylon rope.
Can you imagine being that prisoner guy trying to punk what was his name? Pao Chai, something like that? Like the main character's name. If he's got 600 ships and 50,000 men.
Right.
Like what was that guy thinking?
Yeah, what was his plan?
For real.
Well, I think in this continuity, he had the one ship and it had a leak in it.
I mean, yes, that's true. And then that freaking
It was a much smaller scale.
idiot was like, just cover the leak. We're sailing out to sea.
Yeah, it was like, okay, you're not a very good captain, are you?
No, man. He just used brute force on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm going to beat you up and throw you overboard. Which he did. He threw like 2 guys overboard. Does that count?
We have
as
a clip of the opening.
Does that count as like a pirate bingo? Like man overboard? Or?
You know, I don't think I have that listed, but maybe I should.
I mean,
I just
we
feel
haven't
like that
hardly-
would.
We haven't really seen it in very many.
Yeah, but if we go back and watch it, it's probably more than we think. The previous movie we watched, Master and Commander, there was a man overboard and he died.
He did. He died.
There's probably more than you think.
Rip. I mean, there might be. Yeah, do you want to go ahead and take a look at the opening?
Yeah.
Fire.
I mean, the ships look pretty cool.
Dude, and these guys are throwing like knives and stuff at them.
Yeah.
Like, would you even... Like, how far apart are they? Would it even make it over there?
No. If the lady was on the ship with a little bitty daggers, then yes, she could do it.
I also think these guys might have the worst aim of any.
Yes,
movie that we've
they
seen
didn't
so
want to
far.
destroy the ships that they spent a lot of money to build.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a
guess
fire
so.
on one though.
I mean, they do
somersault.
hit, clearly, because the ship almost sinks. But I was like, man, these guys have. And how did they swim across there so fast?
That was my edit.
Oh, you edited that cut?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of slow-mo falling,
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah.
Listen to the sounds here of the.
I love the sound effects. They use the same one for like every time someone hits something with anything. Can you imagine them in like the Foley booth doing this with just like pieces of wood that they clap together and like spoons, like clinging spoons together? or
Yeah,
something?
spoons and the two boards together.
But yeah, I thought that was cool. I mean, that's probably one of the more piratey things that we've seen in a movie. I mean, there's been a couple that we've watched that have been, something to that extent. And usually that happens more towards the end of the movie, like as like a final battle or something. And this one's just like opening up with, hey, yeah, we're attacking a ship.
Yeah.
Question: which had more satisfying sword sounds, this one or Hook?
That's tough.
I would
Sword
probably-
sounds,
I don't
Hook.
know. I'd probably go Hook.
You've got
Punch
a lot
sounds,
of whooshing in this one though.
Yes,
There's
there's a
of
lot of
what?
whooshing.
Whooshing, you got
Yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, I love every. I really deep down, I do kind of wish every movie had like the Foley artist like worked for Hanna-Barbera. Like, I wish that all sounds were like cartoon sounds,
I mean, this one's pretty much
which is
that.
why I like these. Like,
This is
there's-
pretty much that. Yeah. I thought it was interesting that I couldn't tell if they were just making the same sound over and over, or if they literally use the exact same soundbite for every time someone made contact with someone else.
I think they just use the same soundbite that someone probably recorded in like the 50s.
Like,
And
like didn't
there was a
someone
guy
get
whose
hit
job
with
it
a
was
sword
to,
and it made a kapoosh sound?
yes, they did. It made the incorrect sound like a few times,
Oh man.
where it was sword on sword and it would go whoosh.
Yeah. It's fun though.
Yeah.
You can't deny the enjoyment factor of hearing that. All we needed was like a
Boing.
and a boing sound. And what's the like shotgun one that y'all like? That's a Hanna-Barbera sound effect. Sounds like like a gun hitting something else. I don't know. Like a
I don't know. I
pop or
like the one
something.
that's in the song Pony. The whoop sound.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You want it? Let's do it. Riding my pony. Oh my gosh.
Oh, the horse hooves in this movie. I don't think they're in a clip, but they sound so funny that as soon as it came on, me and Ryan both were like, they sounded better in Monty Python when they were doing the coconut gag.
Yeah.
Like the sounds of the horse's hooves sound like someone like punching a pillow or something. I
Or
don't
someone
know.
going like on a table.
Yeah.
I was like, man, they sounded better in Monty Python with the guy with the coconuts. Like just not even with a horse, just making the sounds.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the hairstyles? Like this
Yes,
movie
yeah.
had some of the worst hairstyles that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever that one guy had where he's got like the really long hair, like from like the middle of his head backwards and the whole front is like shaved. I was
Yeah.
like, that's got to be the worst haircut I've ever seen.
There's a lot of that. I don't know particularly why, but there was a lot of that in, you know, what, 15, 16, 1700s Asia of shaving the front part of your head.
This was a big kind of thing that people talked about with Shogun because a lot of the characters
Have hair
tops of their
similar
head
to that.
would be completely shaved, and then they'd have long hair outside, and it would be so that their kind of battle helmet would fit better.
Just so
These
one of
guys-
the long hair.
These
but
guys
they
didn't
wanted
wear a
it
battle
functional,
helmet
too.
though. Like they was just unnecessarily bad.
But
haircuts.
in a lot of these, you know, historic, you know, kung fu movies, they have some variation of that hair.
Yeah,
Or
just
even if like
terrible
the
haircuts.
heroes, they have you know, they aren't shaved anywhere, but they have the super long, you know,
Yeah.
braid.
I mean, the way that this movie portrays it, they didn't have to worry about like having women attracted to them. Like they just paid for it.
Yes, there's a lot of that in this movie.
Just paid for it.
And speaking of which,
including one scene.
okay,
which
there's
was
one scene
insane.
where there's two idiots from his crew go to like a brothel, and it cuts to the scene where they're there, and there's these girls,
Uh-huh.
and there's a guy who is basically groping this woman.
His hand is inside her robe.
His hand is inside her robe, and so we're not going to show the clip, basically. But he says something very, very interesting in the subtitles. Now,
No,
I don't know.
That's the second guy. The first guy that it cuts to is like, "Oh, these are big. You like big ones. Here, have her."
Yes. And then the main pervert guy goes, "Oh," like he, you know. And then he says the subtitles, which who knows how close they are to, you know,
Good
the
heavens!
direct translation. He says, "Good heavens." And then he says, I wrote this down. "If you have kids, they will surely be killed." I guess implying that her breasts
Which
are so
means
large that
what?
it would.
Suffocate them as she was
I
trying to
don't know.
breastfeed.
I'm
Like,
just
I don't-
saying that I wish I had that kind of riz.
Do you though?
No, I don't. No, it's that's an insane thing to say, even in a subtitled like kung fu movie. Like that's crazy.
I'm still not sure what that means.
I didn't.
Still not sure what that means.
Did you have any particular reaction to that part, Christian? Did you notice that part of what he said or no?
Did you watch this with subtitles on, or did you just, raw dog it? Like, I'm gonna sit through this Chinese movie.
No, I had subtitles on. I didn't pay the closest attention to the dialogue sometimes.
Yeah.
It was
You don't really have to.
It was mainly the action that made me perk up. But there were some very strange, is the best way I can describe it, moments in here that, I don't think they could be in a movie today.
Yes.
This is one of those where, I don't remember this happening on an earlier movie, but it's just one of those times where you go back to a film in a different period and you're like, how in the world did that get, approved?
Yeah, well, and you notice in a lot of these movies where the most of it comes into everyone, the heroes, the villains, everyone is just a pervert, all the time. That's
Me male, you woman.
That's basically what it comes down to. Awooga, yeah. The guy he nearly does an awooga. That guy.
If it was a cartoon, his eyes would have turned into hearts and shot out of his head.
Right, and then his tongue would roll out. A good example of another insane thing that makes no sense in this movie. There's a clip that's just called Mole.
Oh.
That's a good example of just odd things in this movie, but also the zooming, the uses of zooming.
I like how he's got a black belt on. I didn't even notice that.
Moles, ships are their livelihood.
Speaking of terrible haircuts. He has a crazy mole and a terrible haircut. He's just
Sir,
ugly.
your mole is showing.
He's literally just ugly.
Zoom. Slow zoom.
It would be interesting to watch this again and see, is every shot a zoom shot?
I would say more than 50%.
I would
more
say
than 50%.
I would say more than 75%. I don't hardly remember any shots that were static. Now that I'm thinking
I was about
about
to say
it.
another thing with these movies is it's not just the zooming. There's not a static shot. They always keep the camera moving. I think because they're basically that's how you keep an audience's attention. That's just how they understand how to
maybe so.
make them, Which, it does kind of work, but it also makes you tired. It makes you be like, woo, you feel fatigued by watching the movie. And
Dude, I was already tired last night before I even got to your house to watch the movie, and it just made me even more tired.
Camera moving so much makes you almost tired, as an audience member.
I very seldom to almost never am like, man, how much longer is left in this movie? And this movie's an hour and 40 minutes. And I was with 10 or 15 minutes left, I was like, okay, how much longer is this? Because I'm tired.
Yeah, it drags a little bit in parts.
I thought it drug quite a bit, actually. And I'm still, I think I put this in my Letterboxd review. I'm, I kind of roughly understand the plot, but, I also kind of don't. And I don't know that it was interesting enough for me to,
it's
really
one of those where it was
in.
almost too plot heavy, but you don't quite understand what the plot was either, so it failed on both counts.
I did look up a plot synopsis, and I don't even remember where I got this from. I think it was from Wikipedia, but this is what it says: Pirate Chung Po Sai sails to a shoreline southern China disguised as a rich trader. There, the villagers live in poverty due to struggle against exploitation and corruption by the government. At the same time, Chung attracts the attention of merchant Sheng Yaolin and his sister, who are keen on killing him for a bounty offered on Chung. Chung then agrees to expedite funds to them in the form of cash and goods stolen from foreign invading colonists. While still on land, Chung discovers that one of his former crew members, Hua Erdao, who's like the sort of bad guy in this, who is an escaped convict, has captured his ship, goods, and his crew. As Hua determines to seek vengeance on him, Chung flees and seeks refuge in a casino. The admiral of the Qing Imperial Court sends young General Wu Yi, who's the guy he fights at the end, to investigate where pirates are hiding and ultimately finds Chung. As the two encounter each other, each of them display their skills in duel while also appreciating each other. Wu eventually grows respect for Chung for his righteous nature and begins to question his own conscience. He decides to let Chung escape the government forces tracking him, facilitating Chung a boat. Chung promises Wu Yi that they will meet again and finish their fight on the next encounter. And I read this, and I'm still not quite sure that I understand what the point of the plot was.
Yes. The most important and the most interesting part of the movie is the adversarial role of the not-so-villain of the general character is the most interesting part of the movie, I think,
Yeah.
The rest of it is kind of like, okay, the other stuff is happening. But it's more interesting to sort of see the angle, which it's in a lot of movies. It's in a lot of Westerns, right? Where, there's an honorable, somebody, some sort of law enforcement guy who has to chase down, sort of the noble thief character. And, they aren't antagonistic towards each other, but basically one guy has to chase the other guy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting from that, angle of that trope. The other stuff is just kind of there.
Yeah, and
I wish it was more about that. You know what I mean? That was more focused on that part of it,
Yeah, and they showed the girl, which I think was one of the guy's sisters that was tracking down them. Where she like kept throwing knives at the pictures of them, like on their wanted posters or something. She almost has like no role other than that in the movie.
Yeah,
Like
I wish she was in it more.
She's like very briefly involved
actress.
in a fight at the end, and then she's just like cast away. And I was kind of like,
you might say she's literally cast away in a net.
Yeah, but I was just, clip. I mean, I don't know if maybe they had shot some more stuff with her and just decided to cut it, and it never made it in the final deal. But I mean, I just never quite understood like why that she was there at all. Because she seems like she's going to play a big role in the ending or something, and she really doesn't. Like it was.
I think in a lot of these movies too, they knew they had to have, basically a lady to put on the poster, essentially. And I think there was always a lady, at least one, cast in all these movies, either as a villainess, a love interest, or the hero themselves. And I think because of sort of the factory style of the way that they made their movies, I imagine that happened a lot, where they were like, okay, we cast this person in this vague role, this other person in this vague role. They sort of write the movie, but then it ends up with stuff like that happening, right? Where it's like, why was that character in it? I don't know. That's just how we do it. You know what I mean? It never becomes much of a cohesive, full story because they're making them so fast.
Yeah. You're telling me that the guy going in the girl's robe wouldn't have been a good poster? Come on, man.
Different kind of poster.
Have you touched on the Shaw Brothers? I know you said last night we were going to talk about it.
Yeah, I can kind of segue into that. So just to put it in perspective of what I said about it sort of being like a factory.
Yeah.
They sort of operated in the 60s and 70s like Hollywood operated in like the 30s and 40s, where it was a rigid studio system where they had their complete, like in Hong Kong, they had like a 15 stage thing. There was like 1,000 people who worked there on the lot, and all they did was make these movies. They made a million different types. They made modern ones. They made historical ones. They made romances and wuxia ones and kung fu ones. Anything, basically. And they would also have, the directors would work with some of the same stars. And it was basically putting out tons of movies in a year. I looked up 1973, like what they made in that year. just in that year, 1973, they produced 34 movies. So think about that.
Oh
Just
my
in that
God.
year, they made 34 movies came out of that studio. And it's estimated that probably a little over 1,000 films were made there over the studio's lifetime, from like the 50s through like 1985.
That's so many. Which, when you look at it, you know, there's some companies like nowadays that are doing something like that, where, and it's not necessarily like, hey, we are like producing this movie start to finish. Like, a lot of stuff gets picked up now at festivals or something that's an indie deal, and then like they get distribution rights for it or whatever. I know like A24 is pretty big on that. And then I think I'm not sure if Neon does the same kind of deal, but there's a lot of like smaller kind of movies. And so it's not all just like, you know, big, like we're going to make big movies. Like there's a whole bunch of A24 stuff that comes out that's small and weird, and people will probably never go see except for a small handful of people.
Right. And even when you want to go see it, sometimes you can't. Friendship.
Yeah. Friendship. Which, you know.
By the way, I think you should leave subreddit. Every post is just like a Tim Robinson meme, and then someone's like me when I'm trying to find a showing of Friendship and I can't go see it.
It's literally nowhere.
Every single post is that.
Yeah. It's literally nowhere. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of like little stuff that gets picked up by some of the studios now. But I mean, you weren't having nearly as many indie. Like, it was so inaccessible to be able to film stuff like this.
Yes, you had to have so much equipment.
You'd have to have all the equipment. I mean, most of it was shot on, if not all of it was shot on film. And you know, that stuff is expensive. It's not like film is cheap. Film cameras are not cheap. So, you know,
it made sense to do it the way they were doing it at the time. Unless
you had someone shooting a feature movie, like a feature length film on like 8 mil or Super 8 or something like that, that would have been for like home movies. Yeah. And I mean, you may have something like that, but most of this stuff is going through like big studios are shooting it on, you know, 35 mil. And it's not cheap. So the fact that they're putting out 34 in a year is a lot. It's a lot. They're pumping out.
Basically, it was they for them, they understood it like, okay, the way we can make money is a volume business. We spend mid-budget on all this stuff and make as much of it as possible.
Yeah. I didn't really have enough time or the I didn't really find a whole lot about this movie either, because I was interested to see whether or not they actually like built the ships that they have at the beginning, or if that was something that they had like rented from somewhere and it was just a ship and they like outfitted it. I didn't really find anything on that, because I know like Cutthroat Island, they built ships. I think Master and Commander built ships. I'm trying to think, was there one more where they built like actual?
They talk about it a little bit in Pirates of the Caribbean,
where they built some ships.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you've got some of these like big pirate movies, or just sailing movies in general. Master Commander, you know, not really a pirate movie, where that they have, you know, put in a lot of time and money into building these ships to make them look really cool and really realistic and actually sort of fully functioning. Mm-hmm. And I would be interested to know whether or not for the pirate, with them cranking out, you know, mid to low budget movies, and I would be interested to know what the shooting timeline on this would have been too, because
that's true. How
a lot of it takes place in like one town, so like you could probably
and you know they reused probably sets and land outdoor locations all the time.
Yeah. So I'd be interested to know like how much of the budget that they did actually went towards, you know, like building sets and ships and stuff.
Yeah.
And, if that was even something that they did, because the ships, I mean, they look cool in this. It's not like, you know, they're not the biggest ships ever.
Right, but you don't look at it and go, ha ha, look at silly fake ship.
It's a tiny little dinghy.
It works in the movie.
It works. But I don't know. I thought they were cool. And they were sort of lackluster in a way compared to some of the other ones that we've seen. But I mean, I don't know that that's too much out of the ordinary for pirates, especially if you have 600 ships in a fleet. Like they're not all gonna be like this extravagant.
They're all gonna be winners.
Well, I mean, they might be winners. You got 600 of them, but I don't know that they would be this, big extravagant ship like we are kind of accustomed to seeing. Is it the first Pirates of the Caribbean when he steals the boat and they have that gigantic ship out there?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the greatest pirate that I've ever seen. That thing's huge, man. Like, I know that's not necessarily a pirate ship, like that was part of the Navy or something like that, but that ship is massive. And this would be like a speck compared to that thing. I don't know. I thought they were cool. Christian, how would those have compared to like the ships that you would have seen pirates using at that time?
For the most part, fairly accurate. I think they got the main difference was the design of the sails. But we had also, at the time that they were,
because these were like
sailing.
a paperish looking sail, right? With like wooden,
like a rigid base, sort of
like wooden.
And I'm assuming if they were called the Red Flag Fleet, that they would have flown red flags. I don't know.
They were red flags.
I'm assuming that would have just been the most widely available color or textile or fabric that they would have had to use. I know that one of the biggest, I think I mentioned it, but I know that one of the biggest historical complaints about the black sails in Pirates of the Caribbean was that black would have been overwhelmingly expensive. Just one of those things you don't think about. So I'm interested to know how they got away with red, if it was dyed, if it was like a specific type of fabric, if it was actually cheaper.
Right.
But it would have just been flags, right? It wouldn't have been sails for the red flags, because they had red flags on that ship in the movie.
They did often use red sails too. I don't know if it was a different material. Again, I know so little about kind of the Chinese.
Oh, I have something.
You have something.
Can you
not
imagine
about not about
a
flags,
ship with
but about
red
the
sails coming at you too? That'd be like, you'd be like, dang, that's a ship from hell.
Supposedly, the traditional, I don't know if it's called junk or yunk. That's the typical, which is essentially what we saw in the movie. They're sort of more squatted down and wider than what we think of like a European style ship. But the red sails on it was originally there because the woven grass that they turned into canvas, the tanning in it was from an oak tree, and it resulted in sort of a reddish brown color.
Oh, bingo!
Interesting.
And I think
So
later on they
something-
liked the look of it, so then they started dyeing them red, even when they weren't using the original stuff.
Oh, okay.
Because they were like, we like the way it looks, I guess.
Yeah. So that would have been like very visually striking to European fleets.
It would have been cool.
And probably how they got that Red Fleet name.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But the ships were a little bit different. They looked to me like they were a lot lower to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a lot sharper edges. Very artistic. But it was also at a time period to where there was a lot of cultural exchange and exchange of sailing knowledge and how ships are built. So I would assume this is probably around the time period to where everyone's ships start kind of merging into look like the same general form.
Well, this is a kung fu movie, so let's go ahead and take a look at the final battle scene on the beach. Hey, got yeeted.
This is so great.
Oh my god!
Because if it was a quick shot of it, it would be interesting. But because it lingers
just
so
keeps
long, it becomes
going.
funny. He's fighting the mole guy.
Like, did that guy even touch him there? Or did he just dive in the water? Because you hear a whoosh, but I swear, I noticed it last night too. I don't think that guy actually touched him.
Was that like a nut shot that killed him?
I think he broke his legs. Or maybe he like whipped him and it broke his neck. Like a...
Okay, I love the shot of the foot like just coming up. Of the like from the POV of like we're the guy and we see his little foot like come up.
There's a lot of grunting going on.
Yeah.
During those
So
fight
if you're
scenes.
curious, the one labeled love scene, it's not a love scene, but it's where the pirate and the general have like their goodbye. And upon rewatching it, I was like, I think this is them confessing their love to each other.
Maybe so.
But
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, dude, the kung fu's fun. Like it's fun to watch.
It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it was interesting. So it's a bit of a different kind of fighting style in this one than what you would typically see. Where like typically, it's a lot of sword fighting, especially in something like Captain Blood, where that was kind of like one of the big like selling points of that movie. I would guess would be the sword fighting and how like realistic that it would have been. And then you have something like this where they rarely use swords, and a lot of it is just like them punching each other or like karate chopping or, doing something of that nature. Or, pulling a net over someone else and then awkwardly rolling into the ocean. So I don't know. I don't know about that one. But they were fun, man. It was a lot of fun to see the battles. It was I don't know, probably some of the better like fight sequences that we've seen in one of these pirate movies. And there have been some good ones, but in terms of just like, and there were a number of them too. It wasn't like, oh, this is the, this final one on the beach, right, or the one between the two guys at the end, or, I mean, there's a bunch of fighting. I would say there's probably more action in these with the fighting and everything than there are in most of the other ones that we've watched.
Yeah. As far as the amount of minutes spent on a fight, which fits for this type of movie.
Yeah, so I thought that was a lot of fun. Braxton, you want to hit some bingo?
Yeah, so surprisingly, there's a decent amount here. Now, there's a lot that aren't, right? Because they don't have all the same tropes. They're not going to be saying avast or, there's not necessarily going to be the parrot on the shoulder.
Can you imagine if we had Aargh like pop up as a subtitle at the bottom?
That would be amazing. He says something in Mandarin, but the subtitles say he says Aargh. It's like, okay, did he really say Aargh?
Did he really?
I feel like that's kind of a universal kind of grunt sound, I don't think that needs to be translated. But there's a decent amount here. There were gigantic treasure chests.
There were.
There's plenty of sword fights. There's cannon fire. They got the 18th century style of ship there in the beginning with the Portuguese ship.
There was a cutlass between the teeth because when that happened, you freaked out.
Because I was surprised seeing it. There was a cutlass between the teeth. There were ridiculous amounts of the gold treasure. There was piles and piles of it that they stole. They do steal another ship. A pirate is going to be executed, which is the big guy, his brother character who steals his ship also.
Well, did we see some sort of execution at one point?
No, but they're coming to take him to, I assume, like the gallows.
Yeah, but
that's when he breaks out.
There was something like out in like a square where I swear they were getting ready to like hang someone.
Yeah, it may have been just before that because they were going to come and get him, and then he breaks free.
Maybe
basically.
So, yeah.
Which is what always happens, right? They're always going to be, and then they get away somehow. There's a boarding party. They do technically say the word pirate, even though it's in Mandarin. So that counts. They raise their sails. There's plenty of unnecessarily shirtless guys on the crew. In fact, that's the whole crew, even the lead guy. They sort of swing and fly around among the rigging. And that's it. So not too shabby for this type of movie.
Christian, did you have anything else that you noticed that would be on the bingo card that Braxton might have missed?
No, but I do think that it was a really nice change of pace to have kung fu, because I feel like that's what we were missing in the majority of other films.
Uh,
That one should be on the bingo. Kung Fu.
yes, right. Is there some sort of martial arts?
We just have one movie that has Kung Fu.
I love.
I do think it would be interesting to add beach fighting.
Oh yeah.
Fight on a beach is not a bad bingo one to add. Should I add that? Like
I mean, this would be what, the 5th one probably.
Yeah, or like fight at the water's edge.
Yeah,
I think fight on a beach would work.
because it is always right there next to the
I mean,
water.
you got what? You got this. You got Captain Blood. You have
Dead Man's Chest.
Dead Man's Chest. I'm trying to think. Was there any
Probably.
Cutthroat Island? No. Hook maybe, or Peter Pan. One of the two.
I will add that though. That's a good one to add.
That'd be a good one. If you're new here, welcome. If you're unfamiliar with our rating scale, our rating scale is called the Pieces of 8. We rate the movie on a general scale, 0 to 8, and we also rate its piratiness, 0 to 8. Christian, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. General rating, I will give it a 4 out of 8.
Okay.
More enjoyable than others, but it did definitely drag, and it was sometimes a hard watch when they were not fighting each other in bizarre and mysterious ways.
Yes.
Piratiness, I will say that it is a bit eccentric as a movie. It's a bit out there, but this is the first one that we've had that is about a specific historical character, and so I'm going to give them a few points for that. And I will give this maybe a 5 out of 8.
Okay. Pretty solid. In terms of a general rating, I mean, I enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. I kind of got lost on the plot in there during the movie, and like I've thought about it, and I still like I kind of understand, but I also like don't know that it quite worked all that well. So I'm giving this a 5 out of 8. And then piratiness. I mean, I thought the stuff at the beginning was great. It is based on a real pirate, and you do sort of see a number of piratey things. And I think this is maybe one of the few that we've watched that they actually like plunder things from a ship.
That's a good point.
So I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 8 on piratiness. Might be a little too high, but that's kind of where I landed.
Okay. For the general rating, I would give it a 5 out of 8. Just for the novelty of it, it was interesting, but overall as a movie, especially compared to other ones that we've done, it's nowhere near the overall quality. I give it a 4 out of 8 for piratiness because it has obviously plenty in there, but I think that basically where the plot goes and what it's about begins to stray more and more from, being a pirate-based movie, essentially. You could take out the pirate part of it, and it would still kind of be the same basic movie.
I mean, you'd have to delete like the whole, first 20 minutes of the movie or something, probably.
Yeah, but like, imagine if
And
that
then-
was, that they're just on land.
Yeah.
That they have a fight on land.
I mean,
And instead of on the beach, they're just in the forest.
I mean, other than the fact that they're trying to capture him because he's a pirate, like you could just say, "Oh, he's a bad guy," and then
or he's like,
whether he is
or
not.
again, literally like the movie is, he's an outlaw Robin Hood type who lives in the woods and, is stealing stuff from,
Yeah. Steal from the rich, give to the poor.
Yeah, I would say it's much more similar to a Robin Hood story than a pirate movie, actually.
I can see that. Yeah. All right. Well, it's almost time for us to take this ship to port, but before we do, we wanted to make sure you found our proverbial message in a bottle detailing next month's movie of choice. So coming July 10th, we will take a look at the 3rd installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, At World's End. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We hope you enjoyed The Pirate, and we can't wait for you to join us on our next adventure.